Hey class, it's Darwin here talking about this week's readings. So I chose House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer and also The Secret Life of Bees, and this one's by Sue Monk Kidd. Um, the canons that these books connect with, I'm just going from the pairings list in the appendix. So Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd pairs with The Adventures of Huck Finn by Mark Twain, and House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer pairs with a novel called The Brave New World. I'll be honest that this block was a struggle for me because I'm not familiar with many canons. I may have read them and forgot that I read them, but I had to go back and read the Cliff Notes for both The Brave New World and The Adventures of Huck Finn so I could do this video. So the reason I chose the books that I chose was because the local library had them in paper format, and that's kind of the way I like to read as a paper book. Okay, so I'll read you some quotes from the books that I connected with. From The Secret Life of Bees, there's a pretty powerful quote here on page 2 where it says, "People who think dying is the worst thing don't know a thing about life." And the main character, what she's trying to say there is that sometimes when someone dies, it's harder to be the survivor of somebody else's death than actually the person who died. And in this case, it's the protagonist's mother who dies, and the main character feels responsible for it because, as you find out later in the book, she actually is responsible for it, but it's an accident. In The House of the Scorpion, I have this quote. "I'll tell you this, Al Patron has his good side and his bad side. Very dark indeed is His Majesty when he wants to be. When he was young, he made a choice like a tree does when it decides to grow one way or the other. He grew large and green until he shadowed over the whole forest, but most of his branches are twisted." So this kind of talks about the view of El Patron through Matt's bodyguard, Tam Lin. And it's a very good characterization of El Patron, because El Patron is smart, he's charismatic, he's influential, he's almost kind of like a senior statesman, but he's also sinister and evil. And it takes a while for Matt, the main character, to figure that out, but that's kind of the ride or the journey that the book takes you on. Both of them I thought were excellent reads, and I would recommend reading them both. But I agreed after looking at some of the other posts. This is a hefty book, House of the Scorpion, and you can see kind of, the font size and the spacing is good, but it's still a very hefty book. It's a long read. It's a good read. Secret Life of Bees I thought was equally a long read. You can see here the spacing and the font are a bit tighter. So, and this one was actually filed in the adult section in the Carthage Library. Okay, so the connections that I made to the canons, again, just relying on the Cliff Notes from The Adventures of Huck Finn. So, in the book Secret Life of Bees, you've got Rosaline and boy, the main character's name, It's embarrassing, but I can't remember it. Rosaline and the main character are kind of on their own mission, and I guess it's Lily. Lily is the main character, and Lily's kind of how do I want to describe this? She is running away from her father, and Rosaline kind of gives her an opportunity to run away with her. Rosaline is headed to town to register to vote. She's a African American woman back in the time of prejudice, and that's where all the trouble starts. So as Rosaline walks to town, they find trouble, and they decide that they're going to run from this trouble to the next town. Lily picks the town based on some clues that she had from where her mother might have been. She doesn't know her mother because her mother died when she was little, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways, you could connect the pair of Lily and Rosaline to Huck Finn and Jim. So Rosaline is she's not a slave, but she's an African American woman who President Johnson just signed legislation to allow African Americans to vote, and Jim's a slave back in the time of slavery. So there's parallels, and both these pairs of people and their stories go down similar adventurous paths. And I think you could do a lot of things in the classroom where you compare, how is Jim like Rosaline, or how is Lily like Huck, et cetera, et cetera. I think Huck has a father in the Adventures of Huck Finn who's kind of controlling and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of parallels there. In the House of the Scorpion, they connect it to this book called A Brave New World. And basically in both books, you get, I'll talk about House of the Scorpion because I read that. And then I'll try to relate it to the Cliff Notes that I read. So in the House of the Scorpion, you've got kind of a world where they create this border between Mexico and the United States. Mexico is actually named something else, like Azlatan or something like that. And basically, in this border, they create it to not only grow and harvest opium, but they kind of use this area as a way to keep both sides of the border stable and fed with healthy amounts of drugs. And it's a way of controlling society but keeping it stable. So they're and the few that control everything justify their sinister worlds by saying, look, we're going to trade the freedoms of many for stability of the society overall, and that's how their twisted mindset justifies their sinister world. I think in A Brave New World, you've got a similar plot. You've got humans that are created and conditioned according to a caste system. Again, in both books, you've got characters that are social outcasts in one part of the story, and then in favor in other parts of the story. I think you've got characters that actually change as the story develops, and you could do a lot of things in the classroom where you analyze how character X and character Y are similar and different, compare and contrast. You could do all kinds of stuff like that. Okay. I think that's what I wanted to say about this week's block. So thanks for listening, and see you soon.